In this video, we study money supply and money demand and how they determine the nominal interest rate. We then show how the Federal Reserve can affect the nominal interest rate by manipulating the money supply. Let's start with money demand. Recall that money refers to a set of assets, such as cash and checking accounts, that are usable in transactions. Money as a financial asset is also a way of holding wealth. Consider an individual's portfolio allocation decision. How much of wealth to hold as money versus bonds versus stocks? Well, the amount of wealth an individual chooses to hold in the form of money is that individual's demand for money, also known as liquidity preference. Suppose I have $100,000 in financial wealth and I choose to hold $10,000 in money and $90,000 in stocks and bonds. Then my money demand is $10,000. Businesses make similar decisions when they're allocating their financial assets. So how much money should I hold? Well, what I need to do is apply the cost-benefit principle. The benefit of holding money is its usefulness in carrying out transactions. The more I intend to spend, the more money I want to hold typically. The cost of holding money is an opportunity cost, the interest I could have earned on other assets like stocks and bonds. Cash, of course, pays a zero nominal interest rate. Checking accounts pay close to zero nominal interest rates. So if I hold my assets as money, I'm not earning any interest. So let's think about the macroeconomic factors that affect the demand for money. First, there's the nominal interest rate. We just talked about that. That's the opportunity cost of holding money. An increase in the nominal interest rate should reduce money demand. Real income or output is another macroeconomic factor. An increase in real income or output raises the transactions that people want to make. Thus, an increase in real income or output should raise money demand. The price level. The higher the prices of goods and services, the more dollars are needed to make a given set of real transactions. Thus, an increase in the price level should raise money demand. So let's look at the money demand curve. This shows the relationship between money demand and the nominal interest rate, and it's downward sloping. Why is that? Well, because as the interest rate rises, the opportunity cost of holding money grows, so you want to hold less in your portfolio, all else being equal. Let's think about shifts in the money demand curve. All right, so we start with one money demand curve, and suppose that we have an increase in real income or an increase in the price level. Those should shift the money demand curve out. Other things can shift the curve as well. For example, the invention of ATMs, automatic teller machines, or those cash machines at banks, reduced the demand for money. This would be reflected in an inward shift of the curve, going in the opposite direction of what's shown here. Now, let's put this together and think about the supply of money and the demand for money and money market equilibrium. So we've already developed our money demand curve. How do we put money supply here? Well, the money supply curve is vertical because the Fed fixes the supply of money. So we just draw that as a vertical line. Equilibrium occurs where money demand equals money supply. That determines the equilibrium interest rate, which we'll denote by I star. Now, how do we get to that equilibrium? Well, suppose the interest rate started at a higher level, say I prime. Notice that at I prime, if we draw a line to where the money demand curve is, the amount of money demand is less than the amount of money supply at that high interest rate. At this high interest rate, people would prefer to hold more bonds. So the demand for bonds is quite high, and the demand for money is below the money supply. Well, when they're demanding all those bonds, that drives up the price of bonds. But remember how the price of bonds and interest rates move in opposite directions? Well, when the price of bonds is driven up, that drives the nominal interest rate down. And so we start having a decrease in the nominal interest rate until we get to the point where money supply crosses money demand at I star. So that's the market force that takes us to that equilibrium level. So now let's think about how the Fed controls the nominal interest rate. Okay, so suppose we start out with equilibrium in the money market for a given money demand curve and a given money supply, and we have an equilibrium interest rate of I star, and we'll put a 0 there because we'll say that this is what we have in period 0. Let's suppose that the Federal Reserve, through an open market operation, increases the money supply. So the curve shifts out. Well, that should reduce nominal interest rates down to I1 because the new equilibrium where the new money supply and money demand cross is at that lower interest rate. So what's happening here? Well, the Fed raises the money supply with an open market operation. It buys bonds from the public. But this purchase of bonds raises bond prices because the Fed is out there demanding these bonds, and that lowers interest rates because bond prices and interest rates move in opposite directions. So that's another way to think about how we go from an equilibrium at I0 to one with a lower interest rate at I1. Now note that the Fed cannot control both the money supply and the interest rate at the same time. Once it determines one, the other is determined. It can't independently have one money supply and a different interest rate. In practice, the Fed sets a target for the interest rate and then just changes the money supply to achieve that interest rate target. So let's summarize what we've learned in this video. The amount of wealth held as money is money demand or liquidity preference. A rise in nominal interest rates reduces money demand. A rise in either real output or the price level raises money demand. The nominal interest rate is determined by the interaction of money supply and money demand. The Fed lowers interest rates by raising the money supply.